सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
There's been much criticism of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Central Vista renovation for being a part of his usual agenda to change all symbols of our republic and its pre-2014 past. As if when the next generation of Indians grow up, they will imagine that everything that exists in India only came in after 2014. We, on the other hand, need to rethink that lazy idea that the renaming of the old Rajpath or Avenue of the State as Kartavya Path, which is Avenue of Duties, is merely symbolic. It is instead profoundly political. That's our argument in this week's National Interest. For years now, especially after Modi's repeat victory in 2019, his critics have been fretting that anything they throw at him doesn't stick on him. This fact cannot be denied. It is a fact. I had taken note of it in an earlier National Interest where I argued why it's an understatement to just borrow that old Americanism and call Modi Teflon coated. It would be more appropriate, I had argued, to describe him as cast in titanium instead. Criticism over the new Central Vista etc. accounts for very little, but not even his biggest missteps like demonetization, COVID mismanagement during the Delta wave, a 5-year economic growth stall not seen since the early 1970s, they've all failed to make a dent. If you are a Modi rival, to have any hope in hell of countering him, you have to first understand where he's coming from. First of all, to begin with, he isn't coming from where his most articulate critics and rivals belong. Not from any place of social, political, economic, and even intellectual entitlement. He does not have any of the great schools or colleges on his CV, no special DNA or legacy, nor any real written books, written works, or scholarship. What he might lack by way of scholarship, or what is seen as upbringing by those who detest him, he makes up for by being a most full-time political leader ever to rule India. Now that's a tough assertion to make, and there will be many valid disagreements. But if you run your eye and memory back to the record of all our prime ministers, then only one who you could put close to him would be Indira Gandhi. We could, however, argue how he's even more a 24/7/365 politician than her. At least she had a family. In many of his actions, instincts, and more importantly, his approach to the practice of power, he does echo Mrs. Gandhi. We do not know if he's ever studied her method or draws inspiration from it, but do note that the member of the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty he attacks least of all, if ever at all, is Mrs. Gandhi, is her. Even when he attacks the emergency, he names and blames the dynasty, not Indira Gandhi that much. Nehru, Rajiv, Sonia, Rahul are always in the firing line. On Indira Gandhi, you will need to Google really deep to find where he attacked her personally or individually. So here is a hypothesis. He's probably made a closer study of her governance style than even her descendants, and admires the tougher and more sophisticated aspects of her approach to power and governance. His naming the renovated Rajpath Kartavya Path is a case in point. Why has Modi chosen to name the jugular artery reaching up to the heart of the republic after Kartavya, our duties, when in our conventional and virtuous view, we would have thought that the state or the government in a constitutional democracy is first about the rights of the citizens, not about the duty of the citizens. His emphasis on duties throw the ball in the citizens' court. All right, John F. Kennedy may have immortalized that "ask not what your country can do for you" line in his short-lived presidency, but that was only some flowery rhetoric. In Modi's case, this is central to his political proposition. If Modi's critics were to keep track of what he's been writing and saying ever since he took power, especially after his re-election, they would have seen this shift in emphasis from rights to duties. He put it in writing with great clarity in the op-ed piece he wrote for the New York Times on October 2, 2019, Mahatma Gandhi's birth centenary. Just check out these lines. Quote, when the world spoke about quote, when the world spoke about rights, Gandhi emphasized duties. This is Narendra Modi writing. When the world spoke about rights, Gandhi emphasized duties. He wrote in Young India, now it's Gandhiji writing, the true source of rights is duty. If we all discharge our duties, rights will not be far to seek. Then Modi writes that Gandhi wrote in Harijan, rights accrue automatically to him who duly performs his duties. Three upshots here. One, that Gandhi, the original one, that Gandhi might not have minded Rajpath being renamed Kartavya Path. He may have actually liked it. Two, that this inspiration is drawn by Modi straight from Mrs. Gandhi, and we will soon explain how. And third, that most of his critics are so angry with him, so contemptuous of him, they won't even track the written word from him, not even in the holy, venerable New York Times. Just 7 weeks after this NYT article, at the joint session of Parliament on Constitution Day, he said this again, and again I quote from his speech, quote, rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. Mahatma Gandhi had explained this as well. Let's think about how we can fulfill the duties enshrined in our constitution. Of course, nobody would have even dared remind him now that this was enshrined, if at all you can use that nice description, by an illegitimate emergency Lok Sabha in its 6th year. You think the Congress would ever dare to do so? After that, at least on 10 occasions, he's made the same points. And you can read some of these statements in detail, which Apurva has put together in a small article, and I'll be sharing a link of the article with you in the description. What Modi has been doing there is putting the monkey on the citizen's back by shifting the definition of the constitutional state from the government's duties to the citizen. The rights, as Mahatma Gandhi said, he will tell you, will automatically follow. Just perform your duties. To understand this better, you need to Google the 42nd Amendment to our Constitution. It was railroaded by Mrs. Gandhi on 1 September 1976 in an illegitimate Lok Sabha in its 6th year. Its term extended in the emergency. What we often refer to in our debate for decades since then is that it inserted the words socialist and secular in the preamble. That, however, was purely cosmetic because we know how socialist and secular we've been since. The real juice lay elsewhere. There is a reason why the 42nd Amendment was called a mini constitution. It sought to amend 48, I repeat, 48 key articles and the 7th schedule. Besides, it sought to substitute 4 articles and add new subsections to 13 articles. In a sense, it switched India from a system of division of powers to parliamentary sovereignty, took away judicial scrutiny even from laws passed by Parliament and handed unlimited sovereign powers to the Prime Minister. Much of this was repealed by the Janta government that followed through the 43rd and 44th Amendments. Some more were struck down by the Supreme Court later in the famous Minerva Mills case. Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, penning that order, had said, and I quote, Constitution had only 3 articles that stand between the heaven of freedom into which Tagore wanted his country to awake and the abyss of unrestrained power. The preamble change wasn't struck down, we know, because maybe it was seen as cosmetic, and the section that listed the citizens' duties was also allowed to remain. By the way, the section that gave primacy to directive principles over fundamental rights had in any case been gotten rid of. But the section on citizens' duties was allowed to remain. Probably it was seen as harmless. The original idea to give duties precedence over the rights, therefore, was Mrs. Gandhi's. It endures on paper, which means it endures on our constitution in this case, and it is now being redeemed as political capital by Narendra Modi. If only Modi's political rivals had been tracking his moves, they would have found the one thing you don't really hear about him, that he's predictable. And my argument this week is that he is predictable in his big political moves. Because if you studied him closely rather than merely pour scorn at him or making fun at his inability to spell strength or something like that, right? If you followed him, read him, heard him carefully, you would have known two things. One, where he's coming from, and second, where he's taking Indian citizens on this new Kartavya Path.